Yes, it has been a while. I started the Empire Complete Faction overview a few weeks ago, looking into the Imperial troop tree. But let's look further into it. What's next? Well, in the second video looking over the most powerful faction in Caravan, today we're going to be looking into their specialised troops, a number of troop trees that are less common and will take a bit longer to build up. So without further ado, let's get into it with a complete Empire faction overview. Hey, you there. That's a nice VPN you have on your shoulders. That's a bit weird. This video is proudly sponsored by NordVPN. I know, right? These guys are really helping me make more Bannerlord content, so let's be honest, it's a win-win here. NordVPN is one of the best and most used VPNs out there at the moment. I myself actually used it a while back to watch some shows on the US Netflix that sadly the UK gods they didn't give us. But not only can it be used as such, it protects your data when travelling, but also encrypts it so your sneaky searches stay as your sneaky searches. I know, make sure no one else sees you looking up money cheats in Mount Blade 2 Bannerlord. Additionally, it's so easy to use with its Chrome browser extension and fast servers. It can be accessed in pretty much every country, even China. But hey, NordVPN gives you 30 days to test out the product, and if you don't like it, you get your money back, so there's nothing to worry about there. So make sure you click the link in the description and go check out our friends NordVPN today, and thank them for sponsoring this video. Or you can do it tomorrow, or just whenever suits you, I guess. Throughout the world, you're going to see a number of parties going around. Villagers, lords, bandits, and caravans. The caravans are mostly seen around big cities where they take their trade to and from. But because of this, they are large targets for bandits and wannabe highwaymen. Therefore, they need protection. And this is where the Imperial Caravan Posse, as I like to call it, come in. For this first group of specialised troops, we're going to look at who guards these caravans. For starters, we have the Armed Trader. These are archers that defend the caravans against any attackers. You'll always find them patrolling alongside said traders, and they are the main troops you're going to be hiring when you decide to get a caravan of your own. They are mostly archers and they will hang back and pelt attackers with arrows. Be warned though, whilst numerous, they aren't the most powerful in the world. They can also be hired from taverns though, if you want to chuck them into your own party. Although they are only really effective in the early game. Next you have the Imperial Caravan Guard. Alongside the Imperial Armed Trader, there'll be another main troop guarding the caravans. On horseback, these are no troops to be scoffed at. Suited up in full chain armour reminiscent of the late Roman Hamata they are based on, additionally armed with a spear to keep enemies at bay and run rings around formations while stabbing any opening they can find. Also equipped with a sword and shield for those times they are dismounted, they can prove to be rather effective as infantry. But watch out. Cavalry, once dismounted, as a basic rule, are always a little bit slower than regular infantry on foot, making it imperative that they're kept on horseback as often as possible. And the final specialised Imperial troop you'll find guarding the caravans is the Imperial Caravan Master. The Imperial Caravan Master is a strong opponent. They have strong chain armour with bronze shoulder pauldrons. Carrying a sparther and not much else, they can be weak to projectiles, but deadly when in melee. But keep your wits about you. The Imperial Caravan Master is the equivalent to any other tier 5 troop. So they're the troops that we'll be seeing guarding and defending caravans throughout the Empire faction. But what about some of the other specialised troops and units that you'll find? Well, if you want a strong cavalry force in the Empire, you're not going to find that in their main troop tree as we looked at in the last video. You're going to have to find their specialised cavalry trained units and men that have lived and breathed the saddle since a young age. The Imperial Vigil Recruits are technically a second tier troop, but they are first in the cavalry specialised troop tree for the Empire. Of course, they're way more rare to find than your generic Imperial Recruits, so on screen are a few confirmed places where they're most likely to be found, but be aware, this can vary between games. The Vigil Recruit will, for now, stand in your infantry line by default, with no horse to speak of just as this moment in time. Armoured up with heavy leather and some mail mitts, furthermore a pretty steady helm and will protect it against some flying deadly boys. Equipped with a sparther, shield and spear, they are decent all-round troops, great for holding off medium enemy infantry or protecting from archers or even being a weaker anti-cavalry force at a push. But once the Imperial Vigil Recruits get enough XP, they can be upgraded to the Imperial Equite. These upgraded Vigil Recruits will step up onto the saddle and become these Imperial Equites. The horse they ride isn't really that armoured though, so can be taken out pretty quickly with spears or arrows from the enemy forces, so that is something to be aware of. But with their heavier studded leather armor, they can be pretty tough in most situations, with their longer spear and lighter horses making them perfect for chasing down routing enemies and clearing out formations of archers to protect your own men from that awkward arrow in the eye moment. I wouldn't really recommend charging these guys through enemy formations like you would with a heavy cavalry, as we'll see later, because they don't quite have the strength and power. But more importantly, the stats of the horse itself isn't as strong as the later iterations. Speaking of later iterations, the Imperial Heavy Horseman is the result of a quick upgrade from the Imperial Equite. This tier 4 cavalry swaps out the leather for mail and bronze. Furthermore, their mounts are fully kitted out with barding armor to keep them safe from the naughty people with spears and arrows that make them hurt. They have a longer spear and better skills to use them. The Imperial Heavy Horse are really the first step to the strongest cavalry in the game. The heavier mount also gives the player the ability to absolutely smash through anything in their path, breaking up other infantry formations and making them vulnerable to friendly archers and sergeants. Moving on, the Imperial Cataphract is the next stage of the Empire's elite cavalry force, now in full lamella armor, a full chain face veil and a shoulder covering with a cool red plume on their helm. There isn't really much they can't do, charging down routing enemies, crushing through front lines, even sieging a castle they can do due to their strong protection against projectiles, with not only their armor but with shields as well. Being this powerful comes with some setbacks though. Their vastly stronger mount is slowed down by the heavy barding, and their steel-clad torsos also slow their attacks and movement speed all round. The Imperial Cataphract, of course, will still be a massive speed increase over any infantry, but warning, can be outmaneuvered by pretty much any other sort of cavalry and picked off indefinitely by those pesky horse archers. And the final form of the specialized cavalry troop tree of the Empire are the Imperial Elite Cataphracts, the strongest of the Empire's specialized cavalry force and arguably some of the best mounted warriors in the game. Now, with full-scale armor and plated shoulder pads, they're starting to look very similar to some of that segmented armor of you-know-who. And as far as I'm aware, they don't actually have many differences in mounts to the previous level with the Imperial Cataphract, but the main differences come in their skills. They're one-handed, going from 160 to 220, which is an insane jump for just one level. This increase in one-handed weapons would suggest they're perhaps preferred to be in more stationary combat, but that doesn't entirely make sense for a cavalry troop. But alas, they still have some improvements in their polearm skill, so you're going to see some advantages there, but the Imperial Elite Cataphract is an all-round powerhouse and a solid addition to any player's army. The final part of the specialised troops for the Empire are perhaps the most underrated and lesser known, the ones that protect the lands whilst no one else will, stay behind and keep your people safe from invading armies. These people are no less than the Imperial Militia. Recruited automatically from an upgraded city or castle, they'll stand on the walls and repel any oncoming invaders. You can, however, use them in battle if your party is also in such castle or city to defend, but they'll mostly do the dirty work without any ask. The first of these noble men are the Imperial Militia Archer, very light troops equipped with nothing but a short sword, bow and a few arrows, with even lighter armour than any other, but they will stand and fight, picking arrows from castle walls at all costs, stopping anything from breaching the walls and taking their home. Recruited from the peasants of the surrounding villages, they won't cut through invaders, but they will stand their ground if needed. As we found at Thermopylae, a man fighting for his home is worth 10 of a man invading one. Additionally, alongside the Militia Archer are the Imperial Militia Spearmen. Similarly to the recruits of the Empire villages, they do have a bit more when it comes to weaponry, with shields, spears and swords. Once again, very lightly armoured, but some have sideburns, which I guess makes up for it. While being the first level of troop for your castles to recruit, they're in fact a tier 2 unit, giving them a few extra perks than those of a first tier, with decent one-handed and polearm skills. But once your castle or your city has better barracks, you will be able to recruit the Imperial Militia Veteran Archers. These guys are what happens after years of defending from invading enemies, and the Militia Archers get to the point where they're competent with their weapons so they can be considered veterans. Now equipped with better arrows and a better bow, whilst being the next level up from the tier 2 Militia Archers, they're in fact referred to as tier 4 Archers, giving them a better gambeson and mail coif, protecting them from any returning fire you might expect. And the final unit is of course the Imperial Militia Veteran Spearmen. It's a bit of a mouthful, but hey, all the best things are. They have a stronger shield, but the same gambeson and coif as the Veteran Archer. They can defend a breach like no other. Additionally, still having a spear, so in formations they're great at keeping attackers at bay, and it would take a huge army to take a castle of 100 or so of these men, often overlooked by the average player, but the militia troops are perhaps some of the most important in the game, especially of the specialised units throughout Bannerlord. And there you have it, a look at the special troop trees for the Empire faction. If you haven't already, go and check out my first video of the complete faction overview for the Empire, where we look at the main line and most common Imperial units. But it is not over for the Empire yet. We perhaps have one more video on its way, looking at the minor factions and perhaps the most rare units throughout Caravan. And trust me, there's some really hidden and unknown troops that I'm guessing many of you have never encountered. But that's all in the future, and hopefully not as long as a wait as it was between this and the last video. But until then, I will see you in the next one.